I was perched by the window of my corner office, the morning sun catching the gold threads in my silk blouse, when my phone buzzed insistently on the glass desk. It was an unfamiliar number, but before I could hesitate, the screen lit up with a message that made my chest tighten. "Andy, did you take it?" My nephew. Just 12, innocent-looking, yet his words carried a weight I wasn't prepared for. I leaned back in my chair, the leather cool against my spine, and let out a soft laugh that trembled despite my calm exterior. Did I take it? The absurdity stung like a slap in slow motion. I could see the city sprawled below, glass towers reflecting light like shards of something I'd fought so hard to build. My life had been carefully curated, long nights of work, small victories stitched together like gold seams in the fabric of a life I was quietly proud of. But now, in that instant, all of it felt fragile, exposed by a single accusation from someone I adored. I set my coffee cup down, the aroma barely touching my senses, and rubbed my temple. Hurt, yes. A flicker of irony, absolutely. But there was also the familiar stir of determination, the quiet fire that had driven me to this life in the first place. Whoever thought I could be shaken so easily hadn't met me yet. It's time to confront this, I whispered to myself, fingers hovering over the keypad. And just like that, my morning routine was gone, replaced by a confrontation I hadn't seen coming. I remember the day it all began, etched into my memory like a photograph I couldn't erase. I was 16, balancing a stack of textbooks against my chest, when my mother's sharp voice cut through the kitchen like glass. "You'll never understand responsibility," she said, eyes cold, scanning me as if I were already a disappointment. "Stop dreaming about things you can't have." My hands had trembled as I set the books down, a knot forming in my throat. I wanted to speak, to argue, but the words felt heavy, stuck behind fear and longing. Instead, I walked to my room, slammed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. The sting of rejection mingled with confusion. I didn't understand why my ambitions seemed like a betrayal to her. It was that afternoon my grandmother knocked softly, holding a worn, leather-bound journal. "Sometimes the world won't see your worth, my love," she said, placing it in my hands. "But that doesn't mean it isn't there. You carry your own proof inside you." I traced the edges of the journal, feeling its weight. Inside, she had written advice, snippets of encouragement, and even little sketches of dreams she imagined for me. That simple gift felt like a lifeline. For the first time, I realized I didn't need validation from people who couldn't see me. I had to see myself. That night, I made a quiet, resolute decision. I would carve out my own path, even if it meant leaving the familiar warmth of my home behind. I packed a small bag with essentials, hugged my cat goodbye, and whispered to the empty room, "I will prove myself on my terms." The fear lingered, like shadows along the walls, but it was tempered with a flicker of courage. That was the moment I understood. Independence was not just a goal, it was survival. I would no longer let doubt or dismissal dictate the person I could become. And somewhere in the quiet hum of that night, a seed was planted, a seed that would grow into the life no one in my family ever expected me to build. The first time I walked into the small office that would eventually change my life, my hands shook so much I could barely hold the notebook I'd brought. It was a modest space with beige walls and a faint smell of old coffee, but to me, it smelled like possibility. The woman who greeted me, Ms. Harris, was in her late 50s, sharp-eyed and kind, and she didn't dismiss my dreams like my family had. Instead, she asked questions that made me think, challenged me, and made me feel like my ideas mattered. Long nights became routine. I taught myself how to manage finances, how to pitch clients, how to navigate a world that often assumed I wasn't capable. There were nights I cried silently at my desk, gripping my phone as though it might answer all the questions I had about whether I could really do this. Self-doubt clawed at me relentlessly, whispering that maybe my dreams were too big, that the world would always see me as small. But then came the small victories. My first client, a tiny project, but it paid enough to feel like the first rung of a ladder I could climb. My first profitable sale, a rush of pride that made every exhausted moment worth it. I began to notice the subtle shifts, doors opening, people listening, respect being earned not because of my last name, but because of my skill, my tenacity. I was careful, though. My family didn't need to know. They didn't need to see the blood, sweat, and tears that went into the life I was building for myself. I posted carefully curated updates online, small snapshots that hinted at progress without giving away the full story. My independence had to be mine alone, at least until it could stand tall and undeniable. Through it all, Ms. Harris remained my anchor, reminding me when I faltered that patience and persistence often outshine raw talent. "You're stronger than you think, Emily," she said one evening, watching me struggle through a client call that seemed impossible at the time. Her words stuck, repeating in my mind whenever the loneliness or frustration crept in. By the time I turned 25, the business I'd started from scratch was quietly thriving. I had accounts I managed, clients who trusted me, and a financial stability that my family would never have expected. But more importantly, I had a sense of self that no accusation, no dismissal could shake. I was building a fortress around my dreams, one brick at a time, with sweat, strategy, and a stubborn refusal to settle for less than I deserved. I often caught myself looking in the mirror, noticing how far I'd come, the faint lines around my eyes, the quiet strength in my shoulders. Every sleepless night, every ounce of effort, had led me here. And yet, the journey wasn't over. Not yet. There was still a confrontation waiting, a truth that needed to surface, and a family that would finally see me, not the girl they dismissed, but the woman who had quietly won everything on her own terms. The knock at the door was tentative, almost nervous, and yet I didn't flinch. I had anticipated this moment for years, though I never imagined it would arrive like this. My nephew, holding his mother's hand, both of them with expectant, accusatory looks, stepping into the apartment I had painstakingly turned into a home that reflected not just comfort, but success. From the polished marble floors to the art I'd collected on late-night bidding sprees, everything spoke of careful decisions and years of unseen effort. My office, the centerpiece of the space, gleamed with sunlight bouncing off the glass shelves filled with awards, contracts, and framed photographs of milestones no one in my family had witnessed. I looked at my nephew first, forcing a soft smile. "Hello, darling," I said, voice calm but carrying the weight of experience. "You look well." He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his mother. "Aunt Emily," he began hesitantly. "Did you?" I held up a hand. "Let's take a seat," I said, gesturing toward the living area. "There's something you both need to see." I retrieved a folder from my desk drawer, flipping it open to reveal neatly organized bank statements and receipts. "You accused me of taking money that wasn't mine," I said, my voice steady, but edged with the hurt of betrayal. "These statements will show you exactly where the money went." I watched them lean in, eyes scanning the documents. I didn't rush them. Every line they read, every total they calculated, chipped away at the smug confidence they carried when they assumed I could be easily blamed. Finally, my nephew's mother gasped, her hand covering her mouth. "But these numbers, it was me." "Yes," I said, voice soft but unwavering. "The funds were mismanaged, transferred without permission, and ultimately, it was you, not me." Her eyes welled up, shame flooding her features. My nephew stared, wide-eyed, confusion and guilt mixing in equal measure. I'm sorry, Aunt Emily," he whispered. I closed the folder slowly, letting the silence linger. It wasn't just about vindication. It was about recognition. Recognition of the years I had worked, the sacrifices I had made, and the resilience I had quietly cultivated while they doubted me. I walked them through the apartment, pointing to achievements that I had earned in secret. The business awards, the signed contracts from clients who had trusted me when no one else did, the ledger of financial independence that had grown silently while my family assumed I was struggling. Their disbelief was palpable, almost tangible, and I let them sit with it. "This is the reality," I said, voice calm and deliberate. "I didn't take what was yours. I built what is mine. I saw the flicker of shame in their eyes, but also the beginning of understanding. They weren't just seeing the success, they were seeing the woman I had become. Every polished surface, every framed certificate, every carefully calculated risk whispered the same truth. I had conquered doubt, injustice, and dismissal. I had won. And in that moment, as my nephew looked at me with the tentative awe of someone who had misjudged the strongest person he knew, I realized that confrontation was only the beginning. Now, I held the power to decide what came next, not from anger, but from clarity, strength, and unshakable self-respect. The room was quiet, heavy with the weight of realization. I watched my nephew fidget, guilt written across his young face, while his mother's posture shrank under the undeniable truth I had laid bare. For the first time in years, the dynamic had shifted. I held the upper hand. And with that power came responsibility, not for revenge, but for setting boundaries that could foster real change. I took a slow breath, feeling the silk of my blouse brush against my wrists, grounding me in the calm authority I had cultivated over years of struggle. "We're going to do this differently," I said, voice firm but not unkind. "But there are conditions." Their eyes met mine, uncertain, and I could sense them bracing for punishment. But this wasn't about retribution, it was about accountability and growth. "To start," I said, gesturing to my nephew, "you will learn to speak the truth, even when it's hard. Hiding or blaming others will no longer be acceptable. Mistakes happen, but dishonesty will not be tolerated." His small nod was tentative, but genuine. Turning to his mother, I continued, "You will make amends, not just with words, but with actions. Transparency in your finances, honesty with those around you, and a commitment to personal growth. No more shortcuts, no more excuses. You need to rebuild trust before expecting anyone to respect your position." I let each word hang in the air, feeling their weight settle, as if the room itself understood that the old patterns were ending. "And for both of you," I added, softening slightly, "respect is non-negotiable. Respect for each other, for me, and for yourself. Change doesn't happen without it." I could see the relief flicker across my nephew's face, the chance to start over without shame. His mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears, a silent acknowledgement of the work ahead. "I care about both of you," I said, voice steady, warm. "But care alone isn't enough. Action is required. You'll follow these conditions not because I'm forcing you, but because you want to be better versions of yourselves. And I'll help you, but only as long as the boundaries are honored." I paused, letting my words sink in, feeling a subtle shift in the energy of the room. The fear, the shame, the doubt, they were giving way to accountability, hope, and a fragile but real respect. Finally, I smiled, the warmth genuine but imbued with authority. "This is your chance. I'm not here to punish. I'm here to guide, if you're willing to take the steps. But remember this, the power to change is yours. I've done my part. Now it's your turn." For the first time, they looked at me not as someone to accuse or dismiss, but as a figure of strength, wisdom, and fairness. And in that moment, I knew the balance of power had truly shifted, not for control, but for growth, for healing, and for a future where honesty and respect ruled, instead of deception and fear. Weeks passed, and the subtle changes began. My nephew no longer flinched when I asked him questions about honesty or responsibility. He learned, slowly but surely, to face mistakes with openness, and the trust between us deepened into something more honest and enduring. His mother, too, made tangible efforts, reviewing her finances openly, apologizing sincerely, and even enrolling in a small financial course to educate herself. The path wasn't easy, but it was real, and that made all the difference. I often found myself reflecting on how far I had come, from a girl dismissed and underestimated to a woman who had built a life on her own terms. I had navigated the twists of betrayal, doubt, and misjudgment. My grandmother's journal, the worn leather-bound gift that had sparked my first flicker of courage, still sat on my shelf. I traced its edges from time to time, feeling the continuity of her faith and my own resilience, reminding me that strength often begins quietly, in the spaces others don't see. I learned that vindication, while satisfying, wasn't the ultimate victory. The real triumph lay in transformation, in turning pain into purpose, disappointment into determination, and doubt into self-assuredness. I had reshaped not only my life, but the patterns around me. The family who had accused me now began to mirror parts of the integrity and discipline I had nurtured in silence. And yet, despite all this, I felt no bitterness, only clarity. Life had taught me that compassion could coexist with firmness. I could care for people without letting them overstep, and I could guide them without relinquishing my hard-earned authority. As I stood by the window one evening, watching the city glow under the fading sunlight, I whispered to myself, "I am enough. I always have been." The words felt like a declaration, a seal on the journey I had endured and the woman I had become. For the first time in my life, I knew that the mistakes of others didn't define me, and the doubts of my family didn't control me. I had created a life of independence, strength, and grace, one where my worth was undeniable, my power undeniable, and my future entirely mine. And in that quiet, golden moment, I understood that true victory was never about proving others wrong. It was about proving to yourself that you could rise, stand tall, and shine, no matter what shadows had been cast over your past. Bottom of form.